The stranded ferry was an utter disaster for everybody on board. It was such bad circumstances, really high waves, 30-foot high waves, and conditions were really terrible. And of course that ferry was stranded for over 24 hours. From my point of view, I was battered by the wind standing down at Elizabeth Harbour in Jersey, trying to give a bit of a brief summary, and I just felt so terribly for those poor passengers on board.
Well, after a lot of technical EU and tax law arguments, the judge decided that actually, yes, the UK could legally get rid of this tax relief, because actually it was the UK who gave this relief to the Channel Islands in the first place, so they could easily take it away. And they didn't have to abide by EU rules on things like tax neutrality and fairness, because the Channel Islands aren't in the EU, so it could discriminate against them and keep the tax relief for places like Hong Kong, Switzerland and the US, and do it quite legally. So in the end, LVCR went.
We trade from here legitimately, and to see that very small competitive advantage removed, and then the increased costs that we'll see on the back of that, and I think there will be increased costs when we're looking at postage charges particularly, it quickly becomes untenable.
Job losses has been a huge problem in Jersey, Guernsey, Channel Islands, elsewhere as well, of course, but record unemployment levels here, and as you mentioned, I've been out and covered quite a lot of them and spoken to many people who've lost their jobs, and it is very difficult for the moment. The states are trying hard with Advance Plus and Advance to Work to get people back into work, but what people tell us who are out of work is that there isn't too much out there. And I spoke to someone just recently who'd lost his job. He's going to lose it on Christmas Eve, and he's been at the firm for 38 years, really choked about the situation. So for every job loss that's out there, there's a personal story and some real personal sort of difficulties that go with that.
For me, the Rzeszowski murder trial was the story of the year. 6 people stabbed to death in Jersey in the most brutal and horrific way. It really shocked the whole community, and especially knowing that Rzeszowski killed 3 children, including his own son and daughter. Well, during the 2-week trial, we heard detailed accounts from psychiatrists about Rzeszowski's state of mind, and in a gruesome way, it was fascinating just trying to understand what drove him to kill in such a way. We were also shown 3D computer graphics of inside the flat and how exactly Rzeszowski went about his killing spree. And I think those images, and seeing Rzeszowski in person in the dock showing no emotion, well, that will continue to haunt me for some time to come.
It was all quite tense. Obviously that you're there in a professional capacity and you report on it as it happens, but it was quite something listening to the 999 call being played out in court and seeing, well, not seeing her because she was behind a screen, but listening to her being cross-examined, and I thought she was amazingly courageous.
My first job when I came to Channel was the restoration of the town church, and I believe it took them 6 years to get there, but I only arrived just as they were finishing. But it was so exciting to go down on my first job. I was all a little bit nervous, but the very Reverend Bob Key, he was so excited about the renovation coming to an end, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful story. Such hard work finally paying off.
It used to be the dark and miserable kind of building, and holy gloom really, whereas now it's bright, exciting, inviting, and ready for 21st century life, and as a heartbeat of St Helier.
It was an especially exciting election. There was a lot of buzz. A lot of people seemed to take a real interest in the politics of the island for this election. I think there was a real appetite for change. I think we saw that with some of the candidates that got in and some of the ones that didn't. And obviously after that we had a new chief minister with new rules put in place to allow him to take that office. So a real appetite for change. We'll see what difference it makes.
I suppose I'm grateful, but as Enoch Powell said, every political career ends in disasters. I suppose I better savor the moment, because it's downhill from here on in.
A lot of them said because I'll probably be outspoken, but also because I have a reputation of being a bit of a doer, and I think this is the thing that we need in the next states. We need a can-do mentality.
The Jubilee of the Queen, the 60 years on the throne, was obviously something that we had to cover in depth, and I think we did it very, very well. We asked islanders for their memories of the Queen, those who'd ever met her. We showed previous visits of the Queen to the islands, and we covered all the events that happened that weekend, so the parties, the lighting of the beacons. And something that we did that was extra special was we actually sent a camera crew to London to film the boats that were taking part in the river pageant. There were boats from both Jersey and Guernsey. It was quite a spectacular event, but I think the thing I remember most about it was that it absolutely poured, and the camera crew and the reporter were really up against it.
It's been a brilliant atmosphere, especially the last hour and a half. It's just really got exciting.
It's been a huge year for archaeology in Jersey. It started off with this coin hoard. 2,000 coins at least have been discovered in a field in the sort of rural areas of Jersey. Discovered by two guys just with their metal detectors, and it turned out to be worth millions of pounds. Now that got a lot of headlines locally and of course nationally as well, and that story continues.
The strategy at the moment from a fire perspective is a burn down strategy. This means that we are not trying to extinguish the fire, because if we do that we risk having a gas cloud. So what we'd rather do is keep this relatively small fire, certainly much smaller than it was earlier on today, in progress, and control the burning away of the contents within the tank itself. It's difficult to know at the moment how long that's going to take, because it's difficult to establish right now how much gas is still in the holder.
That was a most extraordinary day. I was actually interviewing somebody at Springfield at the time, and I noticed smoke coming out of the back of their head. I was like, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop interviewing you. I think something big's happening across town. I arrived there with Steve, the cameraman, to find that the gas tank ablaze. We actually arrived at the same time as the emergency services, so at the time didn't quite realise how serious it was.
Once I seen the fish here, instantly, 100 million% that was the same fish from in the aquarium.
Well, for all the different crimes we've covered, it perhaps wasn't at the top on the scale of seriousness, but it was certainly one of the more interesting and bizarre stories. A bass stolen from the aquarium. Everyone took an interest in it. There was the police, obviously, were treating it as a serious case, but even they, I don't think, could quite help pulling out some of the puns, trying to catch that culprit hook, line and sinker.
Fog has been a big issue for all the islands this year, obviously clearly affecting airports. It started off in March and it seems to have carried on at periods throughout the year, and we have seen up to 2 to 3 days when fog has meant stranded passengers and flights being delayed. And it's also affected the UK this year as well, so we've seen knock-on effects for travelling through departures into the UK. But it is something we're keeping a bit of an eye on actually, because it could be that this year we've had more foggy days than any other year, but it's certainly something I'll be looking into at the beginning of next year once 2012 has come to a complete end.